Cooperative Legacy Project interview number 36, reprise, June 20th, 2006. We're visiting with former East River Electric Power Cooperative Director and 2005 inductee into the South Dakota Co-op Hall of Fame, Robert Ching. Bob, where and when were you born?
I was born in Castlewood in May 28th, 1924.
Okay, and your family name is not Chinese.
No, my father's people were English, and my mother's people were Norwegian. So that's the mix that I inherited.
And you had brothers and sisters?
I had a brother. My brother died of an aneurysm in 1992. And my sister is still alive. She's 85 years old.
Okay. And your father's name was?
Melvin Hugh.
Okay. And you want to talk about him a little bit? What sort of person he was?
Well, he's quite a guy. He spent 3 years in World War I, and I think it changed Dad's temperament. He was going to school... And I'm not sure if it was here in college or if it was South Dakota State University, but he was going to school to learn to be a pharmacist when National Guard called him up in 1916. And he spent 3 years in the Army, and he spent a year and a half in France, and he spent 6 months on the front lines. And the experience changed his temperament, I think, quite a little.
Did he talk about that experience much?
Very little.
Very little.
No,
Yeah.
not very much.
Yeah.
He was on the front lines for 6 months, and according to his discharge, he saw a lot of action, and it would certainly affect him.
And your mother's name?
My mother's name was Ella Holte.
And you want to talk about her a little bit?
Well, Mom was born in this country. Her people were Grandpa Holte was partly Swede, and her mother was, my grandmother was mostly Norwegian. So that's they were easygoing people and easy to get along with, and I had a good life.
What were some of your early memories on the farm? You would remember certainly the early 1930s.
Yes, I was tempered by the thistles for hay and the dust storms that almost blotted out the light, and we had to close the windows to keep the dust out. Our crops were almost non-existent, and it was tough just to exist those days. In the 30s, in the 32 to 36, I guess, and those were the bad days that set the stage for the war in 1941. And
were you running a dairy farm back in those days, or
excuse me, what did I?
Were you dairying back in those days?
Yes,
in the 30s?
yes. Yeah.
Finding feed for the livestock would have been difficult.
It was a challenge. It was a challenge.
Country school. Did you attend country school?
Yes, I went 8 years in 7 years actually in Hamlin number 3, which was 1 mile from where we lived, and we walked all those 8 years, and I don't think that people were shortchanged in country schools when they had good teachers, good instructors and stuff, you know. Discipline was just as strict as it was in town. And I didn't have any bad experiences in grade school in the country.
Mm-hmm. Did the kids seem to benefit from being able to sit through it, particularly at the younger ages, of watching the older kids be taught a lesson and then pretty much getting the same thing themselves maybe the next year?
You know, I've never thought of it in that from that point of view, but you have to think that teacher had to have a wide range of expertise in her fields, mm-hmm. because to teach an 8th grade class and then back down to a 1st grade class, you know, had to take a great deal of skill on the teacher's part. Mm-hmm. I don't know. We went into high school very capably from the teaching we had in the grade school. Mm-hmm.
I've talked to people who talked about how the older kids helped the younger kids under those mm-hmm. circumstances when they were all together like that.
Well, in a lot of cases, you know, and especially in the wintertime, when moms would dress the kids up pretty heavy, you know, and between the older kids and the teacher, when it came time to go home or go out for recess or something, why, they had the primary job of trying to dress those little folks and bringing them back in again and undressing them and things of that nature, mm-hmm. taking care of their bathroom needs and things of that nature.
Yeah. Did you have any experiences with snowstorms back in those days?
A lot of them. A lot of them. Of course, there was no tractor loaders then, so we all got a fine taste of scooping snow by hand. And 1936 was a particularly tough year. And we could walk, we had cream trucks, and we milked cows and separated the milk and sold the cream. And the cream truck would drive in the driveway that we scooped out, and you could walk from the snowbanks onto the top of the cream truck and onto the other side. And pretty tough in 36.
Seemed like it was throughout the region. We had pictures at home of mm-hmm. pretty much the same thing from that year. When did the first talk of rural electric cooperative happen around here? In the 30s?
Of course, Franklin Roosevelt, I don't know what they call it. He had the brainstorm, the idea, the plan to energize all of the rural area in 1935. And the plan that he had, that we understood from the way he roughed it out, was to energize every home, have electricity in every home. And so they called it central station electricity, but we couldn't envision anything like that they would replace the old kerosene lamps, gas lamps, for electric lights and for electric motors and things of that nature that they had in town. We didn't think that would ever happen. That was one of the biggest days in all of our lives when we were energized and had the house wired and the barn wired and things like that. Big day. It was a very big day. I can remember the day that my wife and I were married then, 1951. They started to energize our farms in 1948 after Hamlin and Dual merged in order to have a big enough organization to get a loan.
The process had been somewhat delayed by the war and the needs for...
Had been totally delayed by World War II, right. Yeah, and the thing was accomplished. We had, of course, at first had Hamlin Incorporated and Dual Incorporated, and then we merged the two, called it HD Electric. And then they went ahead and applied for the loan and hired people and got the ball rolling on it. Big day.
What would be the first thing you noticed different? I think you talked before about the lights coming on in the barn.
Yeah, we had I had bought them before, but I had electric motors for the wash machine and the milking machine there, all ready to install, and I put those on with the belts, of course, to power the machine. And that night we had electric motors on our wash machine and on our milking machine. Couldn't hardly feature that the milking machine was that quiet because it didn't have that motor running, a gas engine motor. And turn the lights on in the barn and see corners that you had never seen before, you know.
Barns will get pretty dark.
Get terrible dark, right. Yeah.
We probably need to bounce back here a little bit to you graduated from high school in
1941.
41, okay. And your brother got or joined or enlisted or got drafted?
He was working in Waukene, Kansas, for the Union Pacific Railroad. Okay. And of course, the Japanese attacked us on the 7th of December, and he came home immediately and enlisted in the Air Force. And
now, did you know about it right away here, or did you have a radio so you could?
Oh, yes.
Could listen to it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So he came home and enlisted and left in December 1941. And then I won't belabor you with my experience.
Well, that's okay. Go right ahead.
Well, I wanted to go when he went, and I was 16 years old. And then my dad, with his experience in World War I, said, "No, you're not going." He said, "I won't sign papers for you." So I went on this way, and then I finally signed up for the draft, and they gave me a 2C deferment, which is a farm deferment, milking cows more than anything else. And in 1943, they ordered me to Fort Snelling for a physical. And I thought, well, this is going to be it. I know I'm going to go now. Well, I passed the physical with flying colors and came home, and the draft board put me back in 2C. And I was very disappointed. But anyway, I finally got in late in World War II. I got in the service, and I spent my time in the Army Service Forces in the Medical Corps in the Army. So I finally got to go in.
Got to go overseas, too.
Got to go over to Japan, right. And that was a pretty big experience for a country boy. Never been any further than maybe Aberdeen or Sioux Falls. It's a big change for all of us guys that had to go into service. Yeah.
What was the attitude of the Japanese toward the Americans?
Very, very bad. They did not accept us at all. They were. They did not accept defeat well. Just let me say that. They were a proud race, and they thought they were right, and that made them even much tougher than they would have been anyway to fight for your homeland. And they had very little love for the Americans that were occupying their country. Not all Japanese. There were some that worked in PXs and stuff that became Americanized to a certain extent, you know.
General MacArthur was in charge over there, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I had 2 or 3 occasions to see General MacArthur. That was quite an experience. He was stationed right in Tokyo, of course, and his part in the whole show goes back a long ways, and even to the reconquering of the Philippines, and he had a part in the whole thing all the way through. I guess him and Truman got in a jangle in I think in the Korean War, I believe it was.
Yeah.
And he was drummed out of the service, and I'm not going to venture whether he was right or wrong, but at least he did not continue to serve for Truman.
Mm-hmm. So you got back over here in when?
47.
So you served what, 15 or a year and a half or so over there?
Yeah.
Okay. So it was like a 2-year tour, or
well, they
enlistment or draft?
No, they had. See, I called the draft board, and I worked for my uncle for a couple of days.
Mm-hmm.
And when you changed your job, they would draft you.
Mm-hmm.
So I worked for my uncle for a couple of days, and I called the draft board and said I was ready to go. So then they picked me up.
And the war was still going on at that point.
The war had just ended.
Just ended.
Mm-hmm.
In the Pacific too?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So, some of us feel that, and I know over the years I've felt that I was maybe didn't do my part, and whatever your feelings were, once you were in the Army, you did what the Army said and not what you wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I feel that there were a lot of fellas that were my age that didn't go in at all, and I guess I feel that I tried at least to do as well as I could, but
yep.
I wasn't quite old enough at first, and you play the hand that's dealt for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it came down to, I suppose, they wanted to give you the deferment, and
and I didn't.
It wasn't a matter of you trying to avoid it at all.
Oh, no.
You were ready to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when did you get married then?
We got married shortly after I got home on the 27th of April, 1947. I'd been home about a month, something like that.
I'd been born about a month. I was born on February 27th.
Sure you were, yeah. Anyway, then we worked for my dad the first summer. And first winter, then I worked for the State Highway Commission plowing snow. The winter of 47 and 48 was one to remember. It was a tremendous amount of snow.
Mm-hmm.
And
as much as 36?
I think more.
Okay.
It continued. I was plowing snow in May that year. And in 1948 then, we rented a farm 2 miles north of my dad, and we farmed just a quarter at the beginning, and stayed there on a rented farm until 1965, from 48 to 65, 17 years, and then we bought a farm down here at Estline in 1965, and we accumulated a section, and we didn't have an awful lot of help, and the boys got their own farms, and so we let some of it go. We didn't let it go. We managed to sell part of it, and we finally liquidated everything in the 2000.
Mm-hmm. Were you dairy farming then?
Yes, we milked when our youngest son was home. We milked 80 cows. And
pretty fair-sized dairy herd for those days.
Good-sized herd, and we built most of the buildings that are on this farm, and had a good operation. I think we had a good operation. I think we done pretty well. We started out with not a very long shoestring, and we've done all right.
You mentioned your kids. You want to talk about them a little bit?
Oh, yeah. We have one daughter and 5 boys, and we always kid that we wanted to have a cheerleader and a basketball team. It worked out that way. We had one little boy that was stillborn, and the other 6 are still doing very well, we think. Our daughter is a certified lab technician in Brown Clinic in Watertown, has been for 25 years. And our oldest son is a trucker and a farmer. He hauls for Larson Electric out of Brookings out to the east coast, mostly the east coast. And our second son is he got himself into the computer software business early on, and now he's selling his commodity all over the world. He was in Siberia not too long ago, Australia. And Terry is first sergeant in the National Guard, and he's been there since 71 or 72. Been there a long time.
And served some tours of duty overseas, in Iraq anyhow.
Yes, he has spent a year and 13 months in Iraq. And Michael is, he works for Minnesota Rubber. He's a shift manager up there. And then in the daytime, he pours cement. Independently, him and his son. And Douglas is working at 3 jobs, so I don't know. They're not, kids aren't lacking ambition. That's one nice thing.
What were your early connections with the Rural Electric Cooperative? Your dad was involved with it, wasn't he?
Only that he lived on the lines, and our neighbor was a director, one of the original directors, Buck Dixon, and he helped organize the Basin Electric Board, the East River Board. He was a charter member of the East River Board, and he was on HD's board for 20-some years, I think, and excellent director. He was very sincere about what he was doing. I don't think he ever missed a meeting, and I personally felt that he was doing a bang-up job. And those boys that spent the first years on charter boards had a lot of things to learn. You know, none of us knew anything about rural electricity or how it should be put together, so we had to hire professional people to come and help. Jim Groth at Basin was one. He came from the east and came out here and basically organized Basin Electric. And Jeff Nelson, of course, is probably the 5th manager East River's had. And there's some big names been at East River, Leland Olds and Lauren Zingmark and Bob Farragon. Bob Farragon was also our, what do you call it, for the, Shirley? What was Bob Farragon?
Administrator.
Yeah, REA.
REA administrator, that's what it was, yeah. So there's been some big people there. Jeff was a young lieutenant and first lieutenant in the ROTC over in Germany. He spent quite a little time in Germany and came back and went to work for East River when he got home. He had an engineer's degree, and I think he got here probably in I'm thinking in late 70s, middle of the late 70s. I guess I can't speak for Jeff, but he was there for a long time. And then I think in 90 or 91, the opportunity came for him to become our general manager. And I was on the board then, and I think one of the best things we ever did as a board was appoint Jeff as a general manager. Mm-hmm. Excellent manager, and he's had so many good ideas. He's a tremendous idea man, And it was Jeff's idea that we invest our capital credits in ethanol, and that made a lot of money available for that ethanol beginning, And of course we have to pay that back, and every capital credit check or whatever kind of a check we get from HD Electric goes against that capital credit. Mm-hmm. That's probably one of the best ideas that Jeff has had, but all through the 23 years I was there, Jeff just absolutely brilliant. I can't say anything else about Jeff. Jeff had a little bit of trouble early on getting along with people a little bit. He was a little bit short with people, and I think that's generally his nature. And when he applied for the job of general manager at East River, he came around and talked to each of the directors and asked what we thought could happen if he applied for the manager job, and if he did get it, what changes would he have to make, or was there some things we would suggest? And I think almost to a man the board said to perhaps get along just a little bit better with, communicate a little better with employees and other people that he had to deal with. And I think he's done a very, very fine job of that. His wife Trudy is a great asset to him. And we've had some very good managers over at HD Electric too. Mm-hmm. Ed Bott was first. Glenn Beck was the first manager, but Ed Bott was our construction superintendent. And after Glenn Beck left the cooperative, then Ed applied and received the manager's job over there. And he done just a tremendous job until 1983, and then Gary Kramer came on the scene. And Gary was manager until he resigned in 2004, and then he died shortly after that with cancer. And then now we have hired a man from Connexus, I think it's northwest of Minneapolis, a man by the name of Matt Hotzler. Mm. And he has been nothing but good for the co-op. And it was one of my last acts as a board member. And I think we've done a good job of picking out a manager. I really do.
Okay.
There's a lot of good managers in the rural electric business, and I really marvel that they were able to get as many good people as they were coming into it. If you'd imagine this thing, no electricity at all out there, and all at once, within a man's lifespan, you have the kind of a situation we have now where electricity is taken for granted, and everyone has it.
A radical change in the way of life for rural people.
Absolutely. Radical change. We got to the point where we could have the same things that they did in the city. And we didn't ever think we would raise to that pinnacle, So, yeah. Well, I could never have served on the board as long as I did if it wouldn't have been for the boys and my wife taking the reins when I was gone,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Let's go back a little bit to how you got selected or asked to serve first on the HD board.
Well, they had the formation of Heartland, and they went around taking names of people that would support Heartland. I guess it was a petition of some kind, and I was one of the circulators of that petition. And because of that, I had the opportunity to talk to quite a few of the people around here. Well, and in 1966, Yeah. They came here and asked me if I would consider running for the board against Dwight. And I said, well, yes, I probably would. I said, I've always thought a lot of the REA and all the wonderful things they've done for us. And I said, if I can help them, I sure will. Well, to make a long story short, I ran against Dwight and got beat. In 1969, my neighbor, Dwayne Stahl, ran against Dwight and got beat. In 1972, they came to me and said, we'd like you to run again. And I said, well, I don't necessarily like to be just a whipping boy down there, you know. But I said, as I said before, I thought enough of the REA that if I can help them by running again, I will. I will run one more time.
They had a rule that you had to have two candidates per position?
Had to have two candidates for each office. So they put my name up, and then when at that time, then when the election was over, they read the numbers of votes that the candidates got, and I thought when they read Dwight's and mine that he was just one vote behind, 1 or 2 votes behind. So I asked our project attorney, Gordon Gunderson, about it. I said, I'd like to have a recount. I said, he doesn't deserve that. No, he said, you were wrong. He said that was 100 and some votes. But Dwight was having some personal problems in his business and whatnot, and I won't go into that. But it hurt him on the election. I think that's one reason I got elected. But and then I had opposition. Let's see, I must have run 11 times, and I think I had opposition 12 times. No, I couldn't have had it 12 times, I think 10 times. One time less than, because the last year I was elected, I never had opposition. They were then able to accept only one candidate. But otherwise, all except one election, I had opposition, yeah. And then in 1982, our East River representative was Joel Rognus, and Joel had a heart attack. He'd been on the board a long time. Excellent director. And well, he was quite ill, and so they asked me if I would sit in on the East River board in his place, because he wasn't able to go. So I did, and then in the interim, then after that, Joel resigned from his boards, and then they permanently appointed me in, I'm quite sure it was in April 1982, and then I think I stayed there until 2005, yeah. Well, that was an experience I never think I'd have. I was very grateful for that.
What were some of the sort of issues you were dealing with at the local co-op here during your earlier years on that?
You mean HD Electric?
Yeah.
Well, what should I do? What should I say? A couple of the main things that we had to work with, or work against, or help with, whatever you want to say, was the formation of Basin Electric. And remember, Basin Electric, if you look at the scope of a business they are now, started from nothing. Jim Gall came to South Dakota from some state out east, and just absolutely, almost you could say barehandedly, picked out his people and started to form Basin Electric. What really forced us to do that was the fact that we were getting our power from Wappa, from the river, and that's another big thing. But Wappa finally said, you people are going to have to build some generation of your own, because you're not going to get enough generation from the 7 mainstream dams.
Yeah.
So then the rural electric saw the handwriting on the wall, and then and I don't know, I've got a book in there, I should study up on that, but East River was formed, a lot of wholesale power cooperatives were formed, and they in turn planned and formed Basin Electric. And Jim Groth was replaced by Bob Shirley,
What?
help me.
Oh,
Bob McPhail.
yeah.
Bob McPhail replaced Jim Groth after the construction was all over with. Well, then the construction had ended, basically. And so then when McPhail came, he was able to discharge a lot of the employees they didn't need anymore. So they thought Bob McPhail was the next best thing to sliced bread, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, they were able to downsize quite considerably. And there would be a lot I could say against Bob McPhail, but I'm not going to say anything. I don't have any personal vendetta against him. He was primarily a WAPA man, not a co-op man, and we noticed a huge difference when we got the manager we got now, and his name is what? What is it, Shirley?
Oh gosh, don't ask me.
Basin's manager.
Ron something.
Ron Harper. Yeah, thank God for a wife that's got a memory. But anyway, Ron came in there from Wyoming. He had a rural electric cooperative in Wyoming. And Ron has done a tremendous job there, I think. I think he's just done a bang-up job at Basin Electric.
Mm-hmm.
They have found new ways, of course, of generating electricity. They're generating electricity on the natural gas stations like we have over here in HD. There's one in Lyon, Lincoln. There's one of these generating units in Coddington, Clark, and they're harnessing the heat that comes from the shipping of that natural gas and generating electricity with it.
Mm.
Wonderful idea. They've also harnessed the wind, up to the amount that they're able to. Now that there's been a huge cry to help subsidize that wind power because, as I said before, wind, they have the records that show that wind can only generate 40% of the time. So they can't offer a firm power contract unless somebody backs them up. And they wanted WAPA to back up the wind power to furnish 100% of their contract. Well, WAPA had their own contracts to look after. And as a result of that, the wind power has to do the best they can. And I don't know how they're doing. The way they have that wind farm at, I'm thinking of Windmere, but it isn't Windmere. Up there it's in Highmore. They have the two
at Chamberlain.
At Chamberlain, and I bought a transport up there one time in North Dakota, where that was. Shirley,
What?
can you remember?
Oh, I don't remember. I don't remember the name of the town.
Well, it doesn't make any difference, but they've got a wind farm up there too, And I see Florida Power and Light are the ones that are. I think they built 27 out at. It was Edgeley, North Dakota, where it was. I think they built 27 units at Highmore, and I think they built something like 27 units up at Edgeley.
Mm-hmm.
And then Basin buys all the power they generate. And Minnesota's got a little different. They compare South Dakota to Minnesota, but Minnesota's got a little different deal than South Dakota has.
Yeah, they have some legislative mandates.
Yes, they do. That's right.
Although there was a recent story indicating that about half of the power that's been produced out here, or could be produced on the Buffalo Ridge, has not been used because of lack of transmission capability to move it to the cities. So the customers have been paying for it, but it hasn't been able. They haven't been able to move it to them. They have contracts to buy it,
and that's absolutely. You hit a pretty touchy point as far as wind generation. That's the transmission of it, and our transmission capacity is so tied up. It's tied up with everything that we have to use it for. Mm-hmm. Doesn't leave you much room to take anything else on.
Yep.
And wind power, of course, is free. But when you consider that every one of those wind towers costs about $1 million to erect, there's a cost there too.
Yeah, and of course the landowners expect some compensation
right.
Too, over the years.
They tell me the contracts will pay only if the generator is generating, and that could be a problem too.
Mm-hmm. I think in Minnesota it's the separate companies that own the wind farm as opposed to the utility that's buying it from them. So they have a contract that says they have to buy it all, but they can't get it all. So.
Mm-hmm. See, Base Electric is buying everything from the two wind farms. Those I think there's about 54 generating wind generators, and then the two at Chamberlain, of course, but they have an outlet for that power, but it's still, you can't sell a contract that furnishes 40% of the power and say, but you got to get your other power some other place. Mm-hmm. Now, Basin has been able to take on the increased power needed by 2 or 3 Minnesota cooperatives, and that's been at one time they had more or less planned to have some of those directors sit as directors on East River's board, and I don't know that kind of they were handling that when I left, so I don't know exactly how that turned out, but. Mm-hmm.
East River does extend some into Minnesota, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, turning a little bit to another issue. During the years you were serving on the HD and the East River Board, there were a number of attacks on the rural electric program in Washington, and one aspect of it or another. Would you like to talk about those a little bit?
Yeah. Terrible disappointment to a lot of us was the Reagan administration decided to sell the dams to the highest bidder to reduce the indebtedness that the United States has. Well, these dams were offered for sale to whoever was the highest bidder, whether it be China or Russia or Basin Electric or whoever, see. Yep. And so as a result of that, they had Congress kind of coming their way, the administration did. And as a result of that, we've formed a giant lobbying effort to go out there. And I'm sure it was in 1985 that there was, I think, about 11,000 directors and managers and staff people on the west side of the Capitol, just loaded in there. And they were all lobbying for the same effort, to get that idea out of Washington to sell those dams. And we were successful doing it too. I don't know how, that's one thing I can't figure out about this utility that's selling natural gas, Northwestern Public Service, and they're selling that thing to Australia. I have a very difficult time trying to understand that. Why we have to have a foreign country in to help regulate. You see, when the Reagan administration's plans for the sale of the dams included the dams, the transmission line, the line from the wholesale power cooperatives to the local cooperative. It included the whole thing. Can you imagine the tragedy if they would suddenly shut them down and not let that power be transported? Just absolutely was without merit. Thank God it was stopped. Yes, there's been others too. Say Nixon at one time terminated the program. That was early on when I got in the program in probably 72 or 3. I think Nixon was in power till 74. Am I right? I think he was.
Yeah, there were battles over things like the preference clause. And,
yeah.
There was a 2% loan program.
Yeah. There's been, I guess you can't ever just relax and say, there, now we got it done, and it's going to stay that way. There's always somebody looking for a change. Yep. Yeah, it's been an exciting trip. It's a good one.
Would you like to talk about some of the people you had the chance to work with? We talked about managers, some of the other board members. One of the people I've interviewed, for example, is Virgil Fodness, who served us.
Oh, Virg Fodness. Yeah, Virg is an excellent director, and he's just a great guy. We played golf in Madison one time, and Dave Blair had a new driver, Cleveland, and he said, you go ahead and try it out, and I hit it, and I really got a nice hit on it, Boy, that was great. And Virgil teed off next after I did, and I accused him of having a croquet mallet. And I said he hit that croquet mallet further than I hit the Cleveland. And of course Virgil always laughed about that. But he was chairman of the East River Board for, must have been 10 or 15 years. Excellent chairman. He's through some tough times, and Virgil was very capable. He handled it well. He handled the directors good. He was fair-minded. And I hope Virgil don't get to hear this, because I don't want to say too much nice about him. But we've tried to organize something where we could get together and play golf, But it must be that Lennox is too far away from Castlewood, because I don't know. We haven't been able to do it yet. But, there's hundreds of people. I've said I don't think, outside of perhaps one occasion where a director got out of hand at a meeting a little bit, and it was a matter of service in a restaurant, and it didn't have anything to do with REA. But the guy was out of order, absolutely, and I can't think of another instance where a fellow director was ever even attempting to embarrass his fellow directors. I know one guy got a little stirred up at a baby doze because we all had to. They charged a gratuity for the entire group when we had about 15 of them there, which is common, procedure as far as that goes. But but outside of that, I just have to. I worked with statewide on their legislative program for. Rodri says 15 years. I didn't know it was that long, but she has very capable hands, and she handles her job very well. Very, very well. We've got some awfully good people, and that's why our program is as good as it is. I mean, take people like Audrey and take people like Jeff and our new manager, and where they have the interest of the people in the cooperative as their first priority, good things happen, and they certainly do. It's proven time and time again. And
helps when people believe in what they're doing.
Absolutely.
They're just doing a job.
Absolutely. And I think back over the years of the employees that East River had, when I got that Hall of Fame thing, a fellow by the name of Howard Carlson down at East River, I'd almost forgotten him. He had quit before, many years before that. He wrote me a letter, and very nice. Other directors congratulated me, and I still don't know whether I deserved that or not, but I was very grateful for getting it. Very, very nice. On our own board, there's I can just think offhand of Joel Rognus, and his nephew is a chairman of our board now. And there, Dale Olson he came on in I think in '91. Excellent young director, and as you go through the program, it's just loaded up with very, very good people. It's a wonder that happens that way when it's something that you're not even familiar with. It takes, at the very least, 3 years to start to get used to the what the initials stand for, and what does statewide do, what does East River do, what does what does how do you set rates and stuff like that, and it's pretty complicated business, but it's very, very interesting. I loved it. Hated to get off. Yeah.
Did you early on? Did you have a role model as somebody you saw serving, and you wanted to maybe do things like that?
Well, I think I really felt that Dwight Dixon, in all the years that he spent on the board, and I knew I could see when he'd take that big Oldsmobile and go to meetings. All the rest of us were planting corn, doing stuff like that, but he wasn't. He was sticking to the cause. And I think Dwight and his ability to go to meetings in spite of whatever was going on the farm kind of impressed me quite a lot. And that's one reason I wanted to be sure that I had beaten him instead of just slide in on my. And there's just this Joel Rognus. He'd been on the board 30 years, and I said, "Well, Joel, anything over 5 years don't count anyway." I tried to tell him that, but he was chairman for many years, and excellent chairman. He knew what he was doing, and I just can't say enough for the directors. They're an excellent group of people. Very good.
And you were able to serve with some of the pioneer directors yet, the guys who were there to start.
Yeah. There's the guy down at Springfield, Don Winia. I think Tyndall or wherever he's from.
Yeah.
I think he's been on there about 50 years.
Yes. I
And
interviewed him last summer. And
did you?
Yep. And I think he was just at that time retiring as chairman of the board of the local co-op board. But I don't know that he was leaving the board.
I don't think he did.
I know.
But I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right on target. I think he did resign as chairman and stayed on the board.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if there comes a time when they don't want to elect you anymore. It takes a long time, and it takes a lot of dollars to educate a director. And once you get him educated, and then you impose term limits on him, I think it's the wrong thing to do. You know, I know some co-ops that do have term limits, and I think it's absolutely the wrong thing to do when they finally find out what's going on in that thing, and their ability is finally honed so they can help make decisions. About that time, you know, they say, well, your limit is up anyway, your terms are gone. I think it's wrong.
Well, a lot of people probably think that maybe, or at least some people think maybe term limits are best imposed by the voters themselves rather
Absolutely.
than some arbitrary limit.
That's right, and I've found that if there are directors that don't seem to be up to par with the rest of them, that they find a way to get rid of them. Then, you know, with the ballot.
Mm-hmm.
Another man that impressed me was our project attorney, Gordon Gunderson, over at Clear Lake. I'm sure you must have heard of Gordon.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely honest man. And I guess one thing that impressed me from the beginning was that he didn't charge very much, but that was so much a small part of it that he just done so many good things for the co-op that Ed bought. We had a little trouble with our first manager. He bent his elbow just a little too much. But I retract that. I shouldn't say that. Anyway, there's been a lot of good people. There's been a lot of our employees over there that just are number one people. We've got a lady there that served, I think, for 20-some years, and she's still there and still doing a heck of a job. They're good people.
Mm-hmm. Were you active and a member of any other cooperatives around here besides the rural electrics?
No, I served on an irrigation board at one time. I've been on the township board since 1968, I think.
It's hard to get off of those township boards.
Yeah. And I don't think I've ever served on any other board. Mm-hmm. I've served as in our Presbyterian church. I've served as moderator of the state in 1987 and 88.
Oh, okay.
And that was an experience too.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of that, I can't think of
Legion?
Huh?
Legion?
Well, the Legion, yeah, I've been active in the Legion. In fact, I just got off a term of being vice commander of the state.
Okay.
Well, that's been quite an experience. I don't know if you're a Legionnaire or not, but
no.
There's 5 vice commanders are elected. When a new commander is elected, there's 5 new vice commanders elected. And they serve probably 3 districts there. I won't go into that, but
mm-hmm.
it's quite a deal.
What did you like about cooperatives? I think I'd like you to express a little bit. I think you're pretty passionate about rural electric.
Oh, I absolutely am. I have to think that all we had some years when Basin Electric was so successful that they gave us power bill refunds And those power bill refunds didn't go back to some CEO that perhaps people thought deserved that. It went right back to the people. And if there was $5 coming, the people got it back. Everything, it seemed like to me that everything was done for a good cause. And rates, one guy accosted me one time about raising the rates, and I said, well, no, how do you know that? Well, we got a new billing book. And I said, I want to tell you, young fella, that is a lowering of rates. It had to do with postage and stuff. Well, he didn't complain anymore. Mm-hmm. But anyway, the whole thing is, it seems like a service cooperative is more successful than a commodity cooperative. Mm-hmm. I can see where our oil and gas co-ops have a more difficult time than we had, and it seems like it just seemed like we had a little capital credits to set aside every year and pay back to the consumers, and we had a what did we call that? When we had margins that were more than we wanted to declare capital credits, we put it into a fund that IRS allowed us to do, and it was called margin stabilization. And that margin stabilization has stood us in good stead so many times. East River started the same thing, and many of the local cooperatives done that. Mm-hmm. What it did was we didn't have to declare those as capital credits and pay back some huge sum in the future, but we could set it aside for a storm or any kind of an emergency that we needed to use it for. Mm-hmm. And that stood us in good stead. As a matter of fact, I think they've got some good out of that this year when we had all that ice storm.
Yeah, there's a lot of poles down out in the countryside.
Oh, I think we had, I think HD alone had 1,100 poles down. And that's another idea that was allowed, and I don't know whose brainstorming that was. It sounds a lot like Jeff Nelson's, and I'd like to give him credit, but I don't know if I can or not. But that's you know, to pay those capital credits back can become a real hardship, and still it's a benefit to have them for operating cash. But when you have to come and pay back $400,000 or $500,000 in capital credits to your clientele, that's pretty tough too. So if you just set that aside, pay a fair amount back, and set the rest in a fund that's sitting over here waiting to help you. Mm-hmm. And nobody's going to take it away from you. And it's just some of those ideas, I really don't know where they come from, but they are excellent, excellent ideas. And just what was that? What was that other one that we had? Load management. And we went up to, when I was a young director on that, up to Elk River, Minnesota, and looked at their system. And we adopted that system, basically. And that margin stabilization has saved East River countless dollars over the years. It's been very good. That's another of Jeff's ideas. Because he's an idea man, he should have the credit. Yep.
Do you think younger folks out here in the countryside that are still out here understand the value of what they've...
I think the biggest interest they have is, hey, just provide us with the power.
Mm-hmm.
We'll pay whatever you think should be charged, but just don't cut us off.
Yep.
Have that power for us, and we'll pay for it. It's harder and harder and harder to get young men to run for boards.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's why the age. I suppose the average age of directors now would kind of surprise us.
Yep. Yep. Well, you mentioned your kids, and some of them are doing multiple jobs,
Mm-hmm.
Which probably leaves, maybe that's one factor in the difficulty of getting people to serve on boards, because they're already doing
two or three
jobs,
yep.
as well as maybe farming.
And I think that's right.
Yep.
I absolutely think that's right.
Just all across the board, hard to get rural people to volunteer for stuff anymore.
And you'll find, probably you know that a lot better than I do, but I'll bet you'll find that a large percentage of your wives are working too.
If you go to a certain age level, it's probably almost all of them.
Yeah, I think so too.
Almost all of them. And that age level might be 50. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Maybe 60.
And sometimes our farm wives seem like they're getting shortchanged on that, because they worked all the time,
Yeah.
They haven't shirked or done anything. Mm-hmm. They kept the home fires burning, and without them, a lot of us couldn't have served as directors.
Well, I certainly think about my mom. I don't know where she would have had spare time at.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
probably the same around here.
Yeah.
What about cooperative education? Do you think that there's enough of that?
I don't think they can give too much cooperative education. A young director that we elected on our board. Do you want some more coffee?
Maybe a little bit if you have some. They're not a big deal.
Is there,
A couple for you.
he went to a school in Minnesota. He took it upon himself to
That's good, thanks.
become as educated as he possibly could. And of course, HD paid for it, but there's a long dry period in there when you sit at meetings and you just gradually accumulate, but it's slower. And he went to, I don't even know what they call it anymore, but he got an education in a hurry, and he got a good one. He's doing very well on the board too. He's only been there maybe 3 years, maybe 3.5 years. That man's doing very, very well. I don't think you can get too much. One thing directors have to remember is you can't sit at home and learn anything about the program. You can't go to one meeting a month and learn anything about the program. You got to go to meetings. You got to talk to other directors. You got to observe and take part in. You just got to take it upon yourself to learn how. Mm-hmm. And I don't have any idea how many people I know because I was in that program. And it doesn't matter, from West River, East River, North, South, all over, you go there and you call them by the first name, shake hands, and it's a wonderful place to fraternize if you have good friends. None are any better. They're good ones.
Do you think there's enough cooperation between cooperatives? There's many. We have still in South Dakota. We have a number of different kinds of cooperatives. They don't get together a lot, but
we had in our co-op what we call the Northeast Directors, and we had 7 or 8 co-ops in this corner of the state. And that was Whetstone, Connington Clark, Dakota Energy, HD. There was Lion Lincoln, some of them. And we had an organization where we elected officers, and we talked about maybe some things like compensation for managers, compensation for employees and directors, and just a whole myriad of things, how our co-op handled certain things. And that was good. We had, I think there was 10 or 11 co-ops that took part in that at one time. And it was an excellent effort on all our parts, and I think they still do that. It gets you closer to the other ones, and they get closer to you, and find out more about what the whole thing is about.
Do you think it's important for the average member out here to participate in the co-op? Is it more difficult to get them to attend the annual meetings maybe than it used to be?
Well, I think that probably the co-ops have done some things to enhance those annual meetings. Mm-hmm. I know when we have our annual meeting in March, we have it 1 year in Clear Lake and 1 year in Hamlin School. And we start serving a full-fledged dinner at 11 o'clock. And we will maybe serve from 300 to 400 people. Mm-hmm. And then the meeting starts directly after the meal, so your people are there already. Mm-hmm. Our attendance has been much better. Yeah. We give some cash prizes, and we give some different prizes that that other salespeople bring in, and I think they go to their. I really think they go to their meetings. I think the way it seems with our boys is that just run it, just run it. You're doing fine. We don't want to get in on that. Mm-hmm. Just keep doing what you're doing. And I don't know. I think of all the things you can depend on, cooperatives are one of them. One of the best. Mm-hmm. One of the best.
Mm-hmm. What sort of advice would you give someone today who wanted to farm or wanted to become active in the cooperative or cooperatives?
Well, I think there's a number of appointments that directors make. As each director appoints, he serves 3 townships. I serve Hydewood, Hamlin, and Dempster. Mm-hmm. And I appoint a membership advisory person from each one of those townships. Every year I appoint a new one, and they have a 3-year term. And they have a couple of things they do. We have a supper, and they act as a liaison between the director and the membership. And if people ask them questions, if they don't have the answers, they can come to the director or to the staff and the management and find out things they want to know. If they come to a supper meeting and the floor is open for questions, and they're perfectly able to ask any questions they want to ask. I think the opportunity is there. I think by and large most people are well pleased with what directors are doing. Sometimes they say, how come Ottertail, for example, has cheaper rates in Castlewood than we have? Well, it's really very simple. You've got there's 696 people in Castlewood, and Ottertail serves all of them. And they can build a mile of line, mm-hmm. and probably take care of 400 of those people. Mm-hmm. Well, one criteria for getting a cheap loan from the government was 2 per mile. Mm-hmm. Well, out here in the country, we just barely qualified for the 2 per mile here. And eastern South Dakota is more heavily settled than they are as you go west. So the ability to pay isn't there. So they have to charge a little more for each patron. But we also have the advantage that it's a locally owned cooperative, locally run, and you know what's good for my neighbor is good for me too. There's not a fight between us at all.
They end up owned by Australians.
No, it sure isn't. No.
Yep.
I don't know if any of my boys will ever, or girl will ever serve on a board. If they don't, fine, there's no problem. They're passing up a good bet. It's a wonderful organization. I don't know if I ever was more pleased with anything I'd ever done than when my board nominated me for this Hall of Fame. That was great.
What have you been doing since you retired? You've retired twice. You retired from active farming, and then you retired from the board.
Yeah, I don't sit around real good. I in the wintertime, I work for Hy-Vee 3 days a week, doing all kinds of different jobs, stocking, loading groceries, sacking groceries, almost anything you could name. And in the summer, I like to be outside, so I have a job from May through probably October, spraying road ditches. And I've gotten back involved in the church again. I got so involved there for a while I didn't have time to do other things, but I've gotten back in the church again, and I've become an elder again in my church, in our church, and I've been involved in the Legion more deeply than I had been before, and so it's just gotta have something to do. I had 3 operations in the last year. That took care of some of my time.
Well, I think there's a saying that if you want somebody to do something, find a busy person and ask them.
That's about right, isn't it? Yeah, that's about right.
Are you an optimist or a pessimist?
No, I'm an optimist. Yeah.
Is there anything you would like to mention that we haven't covered yet?
You've done a thorough job. I'll say that for you.
Okay. We've been visiting with Bob Ching. Thank you for participating in the Cooperative Legacy Project.